Today on Forbes, Trump's tariffs, coming to your medicine cabinet soon. On average, Americans pay about twice what other countries do for prescription drugs. Thanks to President Trump's aggressive tariffs and the global trade war they are inciting, they might soon pay even more. Last week, Trump made good on a core campaign promise to enact sweeping tariffs, slapping a baseline of 10% tax on imports from every country, with China, India, and EU countries singled out for harsher rates. But as of Wednesday afternoon, Trump suddenly announced a pause on most reciprocal tariffs, except China, which he hit with a 125% levy, up from 104% a day earlier, after China enacted its own retaliatory tariff in an escalating trade war. Although pharmaceuticals are currently exempt, it's widely expected that won't last. In his remarks announcing tariffs last week, Trump said, quote, "The pharmaceutical companies are going to come roaring back, because if they don't, they've got a big tax to pay," suggesting it's only a question of when and how hard pharmaceutical tariffs will hit. When they do, one of the biggest losers would likely be generic drug manufacturers and, since they account for about 90% of all prescriptions in the United States, a huge segment of Americans who rely on them. About 47% of all generics prescribed in the US are made in India, which was facing a 26% tariff before Trump's pause announcement. Some, like common heart medications, cost less than $1 a pill, a price that, if tariffed, might cause their manufacturers to reconsider the value proposition of making them. Rajiv Leventhal, a healthcare analyst at eMarketer, said, quote, "Most of them are selling with low profit margins and some are operating at a loss. They could be forced to consider whether it's even worth it to be in the market." That could hurt consumers who rely on those low-cost alternatives to brand-name drugs for everything from antibiotics like penicillin to blood pressure medication. Mark Cuban, whose Cost Plus drug company manufactures and sells generic drugs, such as penicillin imported from Portugal, told Forbes that any costs elevated by tariffs will absolutely be passed through to patients. For some generics, costs could become excruciatingly high. ING analyst Diederik Steydig estimated that a 24-week course of generic cancer medication could run as high as $10,000 under a 25% tariff. Name brand medications are likely to be hard hit as well. Weight loss medication Wegovy, cancer immunotherapy drug Keytruda, and HIV drug Norvir are manufactured in European Union countries, which were facing a 20% tariff. For a patient whose insurance doesn't cover Wegovy, that could mean an extra $100 a month if Novo Nordisk passed on the whole tariff cost. And a recent analysis published in the Journal of the American Medical Association suggested that tariffs on Canadian pharmaceuticals alone would increase annual drug costs in the US by $750 million a year. Even if a drug is manufactured in the United States, it could still be impacted by tariffs. Nearly 90% of American biotech companies rely on imported components for a significant portion of their FDA products, according to a survey from trade industry group Bio. Cancer drug Imbruvica, for example, imports a key ingredient from China, which also produces about 72% of the pharmaceutical ingredients imported to the US. That's unlikely to change anytime soon, because there's simply not enough domestic manufacturing capacity to meet demand. Nearly half of the responding biotechs said that finding alternative suppliers could take more than 2 years. Or Inbar, CEO of consultancy service Quant Health, notes that one consequence of a trade war is that if it snowballs, some larger pharma companies may find themselves building multiple manufacturing facilities across the globe to avoid tariffs. While that might help mitigate their impact, it would still raise costs. He said, quote, "The more sites you have, the more overhead and management costs you have. And those costs would ultimately be passed on to consumers." For full coverage, check out Alex Knapp's piece on Forbes.com. This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.